Hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be doing a review of a TTRPG called Fathom, and every letter is capitalized, so you gotta say it right. At this point, it was actually several months ago when I first played this one. Normally I like to play a game and then review it as soon as possible, so why did I take so long to do this one? Well, because I didn't really much like it. So I wasn't anxious to jump on the review, plus this is the first review I'll be doing for something that I did not personally enjoy, so I wanted to make sure that I'm still representing it fair and accurately. And I want to be fair and accurate because I think there's a chance some of you out there will get a kick out of this game. Just because I didn't personally enjoy it doesn't mean it was bad, and I can't stress that enough. And I do have some positive things to say about it. Unlike this game, which is just so bad that there is no point in doing a review for it because there is not one good thing I can say about it. And if you're wondering why I didn't enjoy Fathom, it's actually pretty easy. It's just a crunchy game and that's not my style. But I'll get into that more later. For now, let's look at our roadmap, and I think I'll try to do it like Ironbound because I think that video worked out pretty good. Part 1 will be about the authors and the book itself. Part 2 will be the setting, which, spoiler alert, is really cool. Part 3 will go over the mechanics, also known as the meat of the review, or in our case, the nuts. And then Part 4 will be some random closing thoughts and what have you. So get your scuba gear on and let's dive into this thing. All right, so who the heck made this thing? Please have easy names, please have easy names, please have easy names.
You done messed up, Aaron!
Anyway, Nikita was actually there to run the game for us, and Marcus joined as a player, and you know what? They seem all right. They were excited to show off what they made, and poor Nikita here was a bit nervous to be running the game on stream. Probably because he thought we were more important than we actually are, but that's okay because I won't tell him if you don't. And I believe they said this was a game they worked on while they were in college and then wrapped up post-graduation. So a couple of young bucks, you might say, though I never talked to Mr. Chin, so maybe they got an old fart on their team, who knows? Actually, that might not even be a Mr. now that I think about it, that might be a Mrs. Anyway, I don't know a lot about them as I didn't have much to do with them. This got set up with Avenue Studios behind the scenes before I started getting really involved with them. They had a post on the server looking for players, and I signed up for what I thought was going to be something simple. Little did I know what I had signed up for. Definitely should have read the fine print. So let's take a gander at the book, or the PDF I should say, as there is no physical book. Unfortunately, I do have some negative things to say about this, the first one being, it's just hard to read, man. And I don't mean word choice or clunky sentences and odd writing. I mean it is hard to see. Maybe I'm getting old, but that is some tiny font. And by being small, not only does it make it hard to read, it does have a lot of awkward empty space on the pages, as you can see here. I'm not sure what they were going for in that regard, but personally, I think it would have been a better choice to just throw some big old text on there and use some tables like this. And you gotta use Comic Sans so everybody knows you're a professional. Also, there are no bookmarks in the PDF, which was super unfortunate. But here's the interesting thing. There's two different books. This one, being the big one, includes everything to play the game, as well as some additional goodies such as treasures, rules for vehicles, upgrading equipment, and something called the Entomb mechanic. Then there's this one that includes everything you need for creating a character, traveling, dice rolling, combat, and all that. You will be able to play the game with this manual. But what makes this one very different is that it is just basic text on white paper. No textures, no pictures, or anything like that, so it's super easy to scroll through and read, and is what I used for the most part, as you can see by my ridiculous number of highlights. And I like that, I really do. That's a nice option to have. And all their books, as of making this, are pay what you want, which is important to keep in mind when addressing the next thing, which some people are really not going to like. On the first page, there's a disclaimer right smack dab in the middle letting you know that some, not all, some of the art was made with Midjourney. And if you don't know what that is, it's an AI image generation tool, which already doesn't sit well with some people, but Midjourney specifically has been less than ethical with training their AI. And I'm not sure why they chose to do a mixture of AI images as well as hire an artist. Usually what I see is you either go one way or the other, not both. And while there isn't much from the actual artist, I really do like what he did. Their style is pretty neat, as you can see here, and I would have loved to have seen more of that. Now, we're not going to have the AI art argument here because it's just not the place for it. If you want to hear some perspective on it from somebody who actually makes a living by being an artist and would probably die if they ever saw my artwork, I highly recommend this video from Jazza. He approaches it from both sides of the argument and makes a lot of good points, and it's honestly a really good watch whether or not you have a dog in this fight. I'll put a link in the description. Okay, so this is probably my favorite part of this game because it's not something I see much of, or at least haven't yet. Fathom takes place underwater, which is already cool enough on its own because look, real talk for a second, I love swimming. I really do. I could splash around in the pool all day. But let me tell you that I am absolutely terrified of anything and everything in the water. I am a pool-only kind of squirrel, man. You won't catch me dead swimming in a lake or something. And the deeper that water goes, the more horrifying it gets. Fun fact, though, I did go scuba diving in Cozumel once, and it was absolutely incredible. But boy, oh boy, was I watching for sharks, even though there probably wasn't anywhere I was. So much so that I ran right into some coral and cut my leg, which burned just a little bit. And then there was that time I was swimming at a beach in Jamaica and saw a lionfish go right under me, just chilling down below at the bottom of the water, and I almost crapped my trunks. Anyway, Fathom does take place on Earth, but in an alternate timeline where everyone has moved underground to escape rising sea levels caused by abnormal ice comet activity. And the book states, while the setting takes place in a distant future, it still draws heavily from aspects of our past, such as the 1970s aesthetic, which has remained due to societal and cultural stagnation, as well as many real-world places and ideas still existing in a reimagined way. There's also a nice little reminder there telling you that you don't have to do things this way and, of course, are free to do whatever the heck you want, such is the way of TTRPGs. However, I do think that setting is really awesome. Now, other than that, there's not a lot of lore they give you. You have a handful of races that seem to indicate there's something more going on in this world, such as the Deep Ones, saying they've always been around but stayed hidden until things went south. Then there's the Ghast, Lee, which is some alien race that helped the humans flee underground from the comets mentioned earlier. So there is some stuff going on there, but again, not much you can find. Or at least not in this book. There's another book called The Guide to the World Grave, which contains a ton of the world building information, and if I haven't mentioned it already, these are all pay what you want, meaning yes, it can be free. So it's not like they're trying to nickel and dime you to death. But really, I don't know why they felt the need to separate them. Seems like you would have put the lore in the main book at least, because it tells you things like where the Ghastlies come from, how the Monkey Boys came to be, more about the comets that caused the waters to rise, and all that groovy stuff. There's a lot of neat world building in there that gives you the history of how things developed, or went sideways I guess would be more accurate, and how the world got into the dire state it's in. So yeah, super cool world building, 10 out of 10 if you can find it. Alright, so this is where the game loses points for me. It's just too crunchy for me to enjoy. However, I am but one individual in a sea of players. See what I did there? Like and subscribe for more terrible puns. Huzzah! So there may be others out there that enjoy it. Now, I don't want to make this video 2 hours long going over all the rules, but at the same time, I do want you to get a solid idea of what you're in for, so I'm going to bounce around a bit. First off, I do appreciate the authors letting you know right away what you're in store for. Right at the beginning, it tells you that Fathom is a tabletop action role-playing game with heavy emphasis on action. And when talking with the devs behind this game, they did say that mechanics from games like Diablo were a very heavy influence on what they were aiming for. And congrats to them because they nailed that part. The mechanics do very much seem like they'd be great in a video game, which is kind of my problem. I would much rather them be a video game than a tabletop one, and a lot of us felt the same way after playing. Character creation was entirely too much for me, and honestly, I was getting a little bit pissy trying to figure it out and make things work. Do take note, though, that I am not trying to say that's because it wasn't good. I think this is where the devs just got a little too excited to show off their system because they had to start at a much higher level to try and flex all the options and possibilities. Imagine, if you will, being completely new to not only D&D 5e, but TTRPGs as a whole, and then having to make a wizard or a warlock or something at level 10, maybe even higher. That's about what we got thrust into. Had we started at the beginning, I think it would have been a lot better for everyone because we were all overwhelmed with the process. It's a classless system that touts, in their words, over 500 abilities. So how it works is that you have 4 stats they call statistics, and they all start with 2 points in them. You have 5 points to distribute wherever you want, with 5 being the highest a stat can go. Then within each statistic are 3 skills, and within each skill there are 3 tiers of abilities, and my head is already hurting trying to write this down and make sure I'm getting it right. Anyway, I do really appreciate how each statistic has a defensive and offensive skill line, so you're never really just up the creek without a paddle. Look at that water pun! And as you can probably already guess, the species you pick will have an effect on things like your statistics, HP, move speed, vision, initiative, and actually I think that might be it. For every 5 ability points you acquire, you get 1 skill point. Now, you can start with 0 points and make your life a lot easier, or you can do what we did and start with 100 points and hurt yourself in confusion. I will also point out that there is an entire magic system and multiple spell lists on top of the skills and abilities, but I didn't touch that because I was already struggling. Plus, I wanted to play as a construct called Aquamus Prime because obviously that was the best choice. Dave from Grimwood Games jumped on the magic system because he's a lot smarter than I am, and if you don't believe me, you can just compare our own games. His game has actual rules, mechanics, actions, classes, and all that. Mine just says roll a d12 and make something up. But the magic, if I'm not mistaken, does start eating into your ability points, which makes sense, otherwise everybody would probably just take magic on top of everything else. Plus, I think it can actually backfire on you in a way, and it does add all kinds of other conditions and status effects. Cool stuff, just too much for me to wrap my head around. There's also backgrounds to choose from, which give you an active and passive ability, as well as possibly some extra starting loot. And speaking of loot, let's talk about equipment. There are various weapons and armors to get, with the obvious difference of, oh hey, this giant hammer does more damage than a pocket knife, who'd have thought? Yeah. Then there are keywords such as heavy, versatile, throwable, reach, and whatnot that are required for certain abilities to function, as well as certain weapons being more effective with various statistics. But the cooler thing was, only some weapons worked underwater. If they had the aqua keyword, then you could use them. Needless to say, the flamethrower does not work too well underwater. But I like that. I like trying to find versatile weapons that could be used both in and out of water effectively. There's also more underwater rules, such as some characters being slowed, lightning-based attacks being more effective, and things of that nature. There's also armor, which has more options other than just better defense. There's a lot of statuses and conditions in this game, as well as damage types, so naturally there is a lot of different armor to counter them. You also have the freedom and flexibility to upgrade gear and items, which is another thing that I didn't even attempt, but David did. He had tomahawks? He had tomahawks he could throw underwater because he put a little motorized boat propeller on them because, why the heck not? And on that note, he was playing as the primate species and he had some silly AI image to go with it, but all I could imagine the whole time was Primeape running around underwater with tomahawks. And speaking of running, I don't know what he did for his build, but the math apparently checked out and he could just yeet himself across the entire map with relative ease. There's also items like grenades and what have you, as well as drugs. It's the chems, kid. In other words, there's a whole bahoogle of ways to customize your build, which is exactly what they were going for. As for combat, you have the typical things like movement limits, or speed if you will, and on the note of movement, Fathom does use hexes instead of squares, so that's pretty cool. Other things include skill checks, hiding, spotting, wrestle, disengage, inventory action, prepare action, things of that nature, and then there's a list of reactions you can take as well, including the likes of opportunity attacks. And here's the surprising thing to me. You would think, after seeing all the types of actions, skills, abilities, equipment, items, and all that crunchy stuff, you'd think rolling would be in the same neck of the woods. It is, but it's all D6s, which is the part I didn't expect. There are, as I mentioned, lots of damage types, conditions, and resistances, which I'm not going to get into, but do take note that is something you have to deal with. And I'm just going to read you the physical attack example from the book so you can get an idea. You are using an arming axe to attack an enemy. Your dice pool is 8 for force, and the modifiers of the weapon are -1v. The enemy decides to use vigor and has a dice pool of 7, which is reduced to 6 after applying the modifier. You roll 4 successes, bloop, 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 whereas they roll 2 successes. Bloop, bloop. Since you hit, you multiply the damage profile of the weapon, which is 1 physical, by the difference of successes, which is 2, and deal 2 physical damage to the enemy. And that's just basic physical attacks, and we didn't even talk about calculating the damage done with resistances, and we're not going to. But I will put it on the screen here if you want to pause and look, but I got to get moving because we've been here entirely too long. All right, nuts, I think that's going to do it for this one. As you can see, it's a pretty crunchy game with a lot of focus on combat and having a slew of abilities and customization options. And the neat part is, despite being combat focused, it does encourage you to find creative ways to use said abilities outside of combat. And if I haven't mentioned it already, the 2 goobers we played with were a lot of fun and really nice people from what I saw, even if they were a bit nervous. I laugh and point it out like I'm not nervous every time I get on stream or make one of these videos. There is a live stream you can go watch over on Avenue Studios, and I don't know if I'll have it done by the time this goes out, but I would like to have a playlist on my channel of all the streams that I've been on with them. Now, if you do watch that stream, you will notice that I make maybe 2 whole combat actions the entire time. I didn't get to do much, and part of that was due to the fact we had to stop all the time and be explained how things work, which is the nature of the beast when you're dealing with something that's crunchy. That said, if memory serves, the GM was banking on a longer play session, and when we told him 2 hours, he really had to start trimming stuff down. So keep that in the back of the head when you're watching and deciding whether or not you want to give this game a shot. Also, something that really surprised me was that the GM had little to no experience with virtual tabletops. And that surprised me, considering how much video game inspiration the system had. It might just be me, but I would have thought somebody that young and into video games and with such a crunchy system would have been all about VTTs, but no, they do it the traditional way and always play at a table. And he was into it, man. I was super immersed when we started. It really felt like we were diving down into the depths of the darkness. It was great. And then we got into combat, and I was just confused the entire time. Now, getting serious for just a second. I know I've had some not great things to say about this one, but I do want to make it clear that a lot of those, at least the ones about the mechanics and the actual system, are purely personal taste. I am not saying that it is a poorly designed system. If anything, I would like to congratulate these individuals on making such a complicated mixture of moving parts that work the way they do, because that is not easy to keep up with and manage. When they were teaching us how to make our characters off stream, we got to see a little behind the scenes of some of the earlier character sheets and mechanics they had. I got the feeling that this game had spent a lot of time in the fire getting reshaped and worked over. Or at least that's what it looked like to me. They had a goal in mind, which was an action-heavy TTRPG with loads of build options, and, well, that's exactly what they made, so props to them for that. And considering how long this has gone, I'm going to say that shout-out time before the video cuts out, so today's shout-out goes to...
Hey, wait.